When you think of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, what images do you think of? Each had a very distinct style of what the culture was like, with very specific fashion, TV shows, music, design, and everything else. But after 1999, that all stopped. You could look at a TV show from 2005 or 2025, and how the people act and dress and design their spaces pretty much stayed the same. At least that's the strange thought-provoking theory people are starting to talk about. And I can tell you, I was there. The 80s and the 90s were so distinctly different from each other, and we could see looking back at how different each decade was, from the 50s through to the 90s. We were fully aware. That's why Back to the Future was such a fantastic movie. The nostalgia from the 50s was palpable, but the questions I keep coming back to are, why have the decades since 2000 seemed relatively the same? Are we stuck in a time warp? Has culture ground to a halt on purpose? I decided to collect all the evidence I could find of this bizarre Matrix-style time freeze, and see if we can figure out what's actually going on. Is it just a pile of technological and social issues creating this, or is there evidence of other theories? Let's go through all of them. World, you believe it's the year 1999, when in fact it's closer to 2199. I can't tell you exactly what year it is because we honestly don't know. I can't tell you what year it is either. And if you think about it, we're sort of existing in the Matrix time warp concept now. And it gets even weirder if you start looking at people's appearances. Now, I know what you're going to say. How could things be the same in all the years since 2000? Look at all the massive advancements in computers and technology. I mean, sure, I get it. It's not that nothing has changed, that we're talking about cultural distinctions between our decades. But the craziest of all for me of this Matrix time warp was one example I saw on social media. If you watch The Office, which I do, and it's consistently ranked as one of the most popular shows of all time, all of what they're wearing and how their hair is styled and everything looks just like today. You could not guess the year any episode was filmed if you didn't already know, because it literally could be any year beginning with a 2. They're the same. Let me know what you Homo sapiens and off-planet aliens think in the comments below. Do you agree? Subscribe, like, share. Getting a foothold on YouTube is impossible without your direct participation. Help us hit our first 1,000 milestone. Thank you, and back to the show. The Office actually ran from 2005 to 2013, so it should be decades out of date. But teenagers today have a more extreme version of Jim's hair in season 1. They have a fluffy mop or semi-perm of broccoli hair now, or some in Gen Z have a partial comeback of 90s hair. Where did the distinct decade styles go? Fashion seems to be stuck in this limbo land without anything truly new coming onto the scene, and all kinds of duplicates or copies of the past are coming forward. Just think about all these decade styles. They were so distinct. Grease, Elvis, and James Dean hair came for men in the 50s, and Marilyn Monroe and Audrey Hepburn styles for women. Think of Happy Days outfits. The 60s had hippies and bright colors. The 70s got long hair, colorful plaids, patchwork, and polyester. I mean, who wouldn't want to wear avocado, puke green, and burnt orange knitted ponchos every day alongside a Partridge Family haircut? I mean, I sure do. The 80s brought us Jane Fonda sportswear, shoulder pads, big hair, punk, and fluorescent color. The 90s was baggy grunge, flannel, casual jeans and t-shirts, miniskirts, hoodies, and khakis with hair and center parts and curtains. That was wild. And that's where we ended the 20th century, right? But this is also where things got strange. The 2000s never really found itself. It was just a mashup of every style from past decades. Both wide and skinny jeans, sportswear, tight clothes, baggy clothes, hair of every length. I mean, just go into the mall today and you won't find one decade's fashion, you'll see them all. And we've been post-1999 for 25 years. But it's not just fashion, of course, that's just the most obvious because we look at people all the time. Have you noticed that Hollywood doesn't seem to be able to produce a unique script anymore? At least not for our movies. All our movies seem to be remakes of the past creative stuff that came out of the last century, and specifically the late 70s through the 80s and 90s. Take a look at this list of remakes I curated from a much larger list on IMDb. Total Recall, RoboCop, Point Break, Footloose, The Karate Kid, War of the Worlds, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Hairspray, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Cinderella, King Kong, Clash of the Titans, Carrie, Planet of the Apes, and I hardly brought up any of the horror movies they've remade. That list is huge. Have people gotten lazy, or could something else be going on? In ancient Greek culture, they talked about muses. It was the muses who imparted to people their inspiration for creativity. All creativity came from them. When people had a creative block, they used to say that they'd lost touch with their muses or that the muses had stopped taking care of them. Muses were held in extremely high esteem. What, did the muses stop taking care of people after 1999? Could we somehow be unable to create original stories anymore? And if so, why? Speaking of movies, I was watching The Matrix recently, and something jumped out at me that I hadn't ever thought about before. Why did the AI program controlling The Matrix claim that 1999 was the peak of human civilization? The Matrix was redesigned to this, the peak of your civilization. In the movie, 1999 was the point when humans had just enough material benefits to strive for, and just enough misery to keep them occupied, that they didn't question their reality. Well, when I looked at our own reality, I realized that he was kind of right. Now, no matter what examples we find, people are just going to try to explain this away. But honestly, there's just no fun in that. If we are stuck in this weird time loop, what could have caused it? Let's go into some theories. Nostradamus predicted that in the 7th month of 1999, a great king of terror would descend on the world. Nostradamus said a lot of things, and I'm not really sure I buy the world ending, is what he meant by that. But what is weird is that in late June of 1999, the comet Hale-Bopp was in the sky. Some theories suggest that the comet really hit the Earth back then. But if that were the case, why are we all still here? It would have been devastating to the point of destroying all of civilization. It's said that when you die, your brain lives on for 7 minutes replaying your memories or living out new ones in a dreamlike state. And in dreams, as we know, time moves differently from when we're awake. Many people who have had near-death experiences have explained what it's like to have their life flash before their eyes. So what if we're living in the interdimensional spaces of our brains after we've already died? 7 minutes could feel like an eternity. According to The Matrix, the world ended in 1999. AI took us over, and the sky was scorched. Believe it or not, some people really believe that we're living in an artificial projection and that AI really did take us over. Which, looking at the fashion industry right now, that could be true. The holographic universe theory states that our three-dimensional universe is a two-dimensional projection on a cosmic scale. Basically, we're living in a massive cosmic hologram, and everything we perceive as being 3D is really just an illusion. What's weird is that there might be some truth to this. Now, every planet gives off a frequency, a vibration, and a sound. We know there are connections between objects in the cosmos and that it gives our reality stability, like the push and pull between particles. That's not weird. But what if those elements of our solar system actually operate like transmission towers that keep our reality the way it is, like projection points in a matrix? If we're talking about being stuck in a matrix time warp, we can go even further. Some believe Saturn is giving off these frequencies that are being transmitted to objects like the moon and the Earth, and that creates some type of projection. Well, in mythology, Saturn is the god of time, and another name for Kronos. So maybe time really is different now. The scientist Stephen Hawking once warned that when we find the God particle, it could one day be responsible for the destruction of the entire universe. And Hawking was not the only scientist who thought so. Their theory was that the Higgs boson is the precise mass needed to keep the universe on the brink of instability, but its delicate state will eventually collapse, leaving the universe unstable. In fact, if this God particle were real, it could usher in a quantum doomsday. On July 4, 2012, the God particle, also known as the Higgs boson, was found. What if the discovery of this particle indeed destroyed the universe as we know it, or at the very least changed it? Did you know that the most advanced calendar of the ancient world was the Maya calendar? This calendar only recorded up until December 21, 2012, the same year the God particle was found. What if, well, it doesn't seem like the world ended in 2012, or did it? Because something strange is definitely going on. In 2013, Nelson Mandela died, but a bizarrely huge number of people remember him dying years earlier in the 90s. I'm one of those people. On December 5, 2013, I was designing the front page of a newspaper in New York City where I used to work. As I laid it out, I remembered leaning over to an editor and saying, "Didn't this guy die already?" Now, if it were just one event, you could easily write it off as people not remembering what happened. But this was the first of so many glitches in the Matrix. I'll list a few here. In the movie Snow White, the evil stepmother gazes into the mirror. Remember what she says? "Mirror, mirror on the wall," right? Nope, now it's magic mirror on the wall. Literally no one remembers magic mirror. Then Sinbad was never in a movie that everyone, including me, Remembers coming out in the 90s called Shazam. Shaq was even in a knockoff remake called Kazam. Shazam doesn't exist, but Kazam still does. No one can figure it out. Ed McMahon never worked for Publishers Clearinghouse and gave people giant checks. There's even footage of Johnny Carson talking about Ed doing this, but it officially never happened, and he never worked there. I can't figure that out either. I remember my entire childhood seeing that guy give out checks in commercials all the time between my cartoons. C-3PO now has a silver leg in the Star Wars movie. The weird part? My action figure when I was a kid didn't have that, and no one can remember this in the movie. But when you go back and check the old VHS tapes and laserdiscs, the silver is indeed there. These mysterious examples have led people to speculate that something really did happen in 2012, and we're living in a different timeline. Why the universe would choose something so close, but with these minor differences in details, I can't answer. But instead of it being evidence the world ended and we're stuck in a time warp, perhaps it's evidence we were saved, and this was as close as we could get to the original timeline. One final theory on why we've been living in weirdness for the last 25 years where everything seems to be staying the same could be that technology is collapsing time. Now follow me on this one. The theory is that as technology develops, the speed of advancements also increases until eventually it advances at such an exponential rate that the speed becomes infinite, like an infinite loop. Now, Moore's Law is one similar example because starting in the 60s, the number of components in integrated circuits were doubling every year. Moore predicted that if the pattern continued, the rate of growth of these semiconductors would become enormous, which it did as the semiconductor industry took this as a challenge. With artificial intelligence being created now and man really merging more and more with machine, this exponential improvement rate of tech has already started. Maybe that's why everything seems the same, everyone is becoming one. In The Matrix Reloaded, our hero Neo meets the highly specialized AI program that created the Matrix itself. This architect character keeps being sabotaged by Neo and the other characters who refuse his program. Those that refuse the program, while a minority, if unchecked, would constitute an escalating probability of disaster. The problem is, the Matrix is a completely fabricated artificial reality. Humans are permanently kept in the state the world was in the year 1999, with no major progression or change. The fewer people that oppose the program, the better the architect and the AI can control reality. Those who break free of the Matrix with their freedom and creativity are what change things. Let's get creative, people. Choice. The problem is choice. The AI in the Matrix thinks choice is a problem, whereas I feel like it's a blueprint for a solution. In the time since 1999, in real life, we've been stuck in the same kind of minimally changing culture, except for changes driven by technology. We interact less, socialize less. Trends come and go much quicker, and time progression is harder to mark because there are fewer tangible things to mark that time with. Let me give you an example. I saw a comment on YouTube from someone who said they were able to mark the time in the 2000s by when they were married and when their children were born. And I agree, families are a huge marker of time progression, as are major events like weddings, births, deaths, and high school graduation. But whereas in the past, people were going out to participate in more weekly activities, physically doing more things, today, there's even less movement and activity. Fewer people go to the mall, and even to the grocery store. Teenage trips to the movies, mini golf, or bowling around happen less often than everyone interacting on the phone. Now, this is not criticism of our current reality. In fact, I think there may be some benefits to this limbo-land time warp, matrix reality we seem to be stuck in. We've got so much more of a chance to make choices that change things. Some people think this is super depressing, that we're not creative anymore, we're relying on AI instead of originality, and things are increasingly gray. But it also seems like the past 2.5 decades have actually been like one larger time period, the way one decade was in the past. And as more people become interested in innovation again, things are going to change rapidly. The people breaking out of the Matrix and seeing that there's something more to reality happens every day. Just check out the comments on my Dreams Are Real episode. It's gonna blow your mind. Now, some people may argue that in the past, the decades weren't really that distinct. I've heard that the 80s was just inspired by the 60s and the 90s were just a redo of the 70s as our parents' styles came back around in their own kids' youth. But I think you really got to see the obvious differences in style here. I mean, I was there. No, the 80s was very unique and the 90s was too. The 90s grunge look came from Seattle, and I have to say part of the skateboarding culture. While the 70s style was a reaction to an anti-war movement, the 60s hippie time period had color and go-go boots, sure, but that's totally different from the neon fluorescence and insanely big hair of my 80s childhood. You cannot say those were the same, but why are trains a little faster now? Cars a little less varied, and planes haven't really improved at all in decades and decades, while targeted ads on our phones are so good they seem to be able to read our minds. Are we really stuck in a Matrix time warp? What are we going to do with this extra time, and what will the world look like in another 10 or 50 years?
Hard basis.
Fast and to the point news and information daily.
Now on to our story.